When you think of the Trump family, you likely picture high-profile events, public speeches, and headlines filled with political discussions. But what if I told you that one of the most unexpected and heartwarming moments involving the Trump family had nothing to do with politics or the spotlight? Instead, it's about a simple, yet profound, act of kindness that captured the hearts of people across the country. Barron Trump, the youngest son of former President Donald Trump, is often shielded from the public eye. While the spotlight has primarily been on his father and the political drama that surrounds him, Barron has quietly navigated his own life, far from the media frenzy. But recently, Barron found himself in a situation that would reveal more about his character than anything the public had seen before. It all started on a routine flight, one that no one thought would make headlines. Barron was traveling with his family, enjoying the luxury of first-class treatment, a luxury that comes with being a member of one of the most famous families in America. It was the kind of moment that most people would expect from someone in his position. A seat at the front of the plane, surrounded by the best amenities money can buy. But instead of enjoying the luxury of his seat, Barron did something that completely shifted the narrative. As he boarded the plane, his eyes caught a sight that would change everything. Across from him, sitting in coach, was a veteran, a man in his mid-60s, wearing a faded military cap that spoke of years of service. The man had an aura of quiet dignity, but it was clear that he wasn't traveling in the same comfort Barron was accustomed to. In a moment of realization, Barron saw something in the man's eyes, a life of service, sacrifice, and a quiet struggle for recognition. In that instant, Barron Trump, a teenager accustomed to first-class luxury, made a choice that would resonate with people for years to come. Rather than simply settling into his seat and enjoying the perks of his status, he made an unexpected decision. Barron stood up, walked over to the veteran, and made a gesture that stunned everyone around him. He gave up his first-class seat. It wasn't a move of attention-seeking or a desire to make headlines. It was simply a genuine act of kindness, a recognition of the sacrifices this veteran had made for the country. But what was even more surprising was how this simple act would go on to change the way people viewed Barron Trump. Not as the son of a former president, but as someone who understood the true meaning of respect and compassion. As the story began to spread, it quickly caught the attention of people across the country, reminding them that kindness doesn't always have to be grand or publicized. Sometimes the most profound gestures come from the most unexpected places. Barron Trump, a name often associated with privilege and controversy, had done something far more important. He had shown heart. As Barron Trump stood up from his first-class seat and made his way toward the veteran sitting in coach, the atmosphere on the plane shifted. For those watching, it was as if time had slowed down for a moment. The act was simple, yet deeply impactful. Barron wasn't just offering his seat to a stranger. He was showing respect for a person who had given so much to the country. The people seated nearby couldn't help but stare, unsure of what they were witnessing. It wasn't every day that someone from the privileged circles of society, especially someone as well known as Barron, would step out of their comfort zone in such a meaningful way. Most people in his position would have gone about their journey, unaware of the needs of others, content to enjoy the luxury afforded to them. But not Barron. Barron walked over to the veteran, who had been sitting quietly in coach, just a few rows away from the spacious first-class cabin. The veteran, a man with a weathered face and kind yet tired eyes, looked up in surprise as Barron approached. Barron smiled and extended his hand, gesturing toward his seat. "Sir," Barron began, his voice soft but clear, "I'd like to offer you my seat. I think you deserve it more than I do." The veteran blinked in disbelief, his face suddenly flushed with both surprise and gratitude. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond to such an unexpected gesture. But as the realization of what was happening sank in, he stood up and shook Barron's hand. "You don't have to do this, son," the veteran said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I sure do appreciate it." Barron, unfazed by the attention they were now drawing from those around them, simply nodded. "I want you to be comfortable. You've done more for this country than I ever could." Even the veteran who had received the seat was visibly moved by the experience. Throughout the rest of the flight, he couldn't help but glance over at Barron every so often, his heart full of gratitude. This wasn't just about the comfort of the seat, it was the recognition that he, a man who had fought for his country, was seen as worthy of respect. The act of Barron giving up his seat wasn't just about charity. It was about acknowledging the human dignity of someone who had earned it. In the back of the cabin, a teenager sitting near the window had overheard the conversations and watched Barron's quiet actions. She thought about the world she was growing up in, a world often characterized by conflict, division, and a lack of understanding. "Maybe it's time we all started doing more for each other," she said to her friend beside her, her words reflecting the growing sentiment on the plane. "I want to be someone who helps, like Barron. It's so simple, but it makes such a big difference." Her words weren't lost on her friend, who smiled and nodded. "Yeah, sometimes the little things matter more than we realize. We all need to be more like that." Barron Trump had likely never expected his simple act of kindness to inspire so many people on a single flight. Yet, in a moment that was meant to be about personal comfort and relaxation, he had unknowingly sparked a wave of empathy and thoughtful reflection. People were talking about the importance of small acts of kindness, about respecting others, and about seeing beyond the surface. Barron had done something that wasn't just about giving up a seat. It was about giving people the chance to rethink how they treated one another. As the plane began its descent, the conversation had shifted. What had initially been a chaotic and noisy flight had now turned into a shared experience of human connection and kindness. Passengers who might have ignored each other just hours before were now engaging in thoughtful discussions, inspired by what they had witnessed. Barron Trump's simple act of compassion had not only impacted the veteran who received the seat, but had also moved an entire plane full of people. It wasn't just about a family's wealth or political status. It was about the deeper values that defined a person. As the plane touched down and the passengers began to disembark, the story of Barron Trump's simple but profound act of kindness began to spread. Initially, the media had been focused on the usual headlines surrounding the Trump family, but this story was different. It wasn't just about a political figure or a famous name. It was about a human connection and an act of selflessness that caught the public by surprise. News outlets quickly picked up on the story, but the reaction was far from what anyone might have expected. Instead of the typical polarizing political coverage, the headlines focused on Barron's humanity. For once, the media wasn't interested in criticizing or analyzing his family's politics. Instead, they were celebrating a moment of grace, a simple action that stood in stark contrast to the often toxic and divisive rhetoric that defined so much of the political landscape. Barron Trump stuns. Fellow passengers with heartfelt gesture for a veteran, read one headline. Another article echoed the sentiment. Barron Trump shows kindness beyond politics, proving compassion knows no party. It was clear that this was a moment that transcended political affiliations. Barron had earned respect not for his name or status, but for his choice to do the right thing in a world that often seemed to value self-interest over empathy. The public's response was equally as surprising. On social media, people from both sides of the political spectrum expressed admiration for Barron's act. It was as though everyone, regardless of their views, could agree on one thing. This wasn't just a generous act, it was a powerful example of leadership that could inspire anyone. "Can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually respect Barron Trump more than I've respected most politicians," tweeted one user. "It's rare to see this kind of humility and respect for others, especially from someone so young." More people should follow his example. Another user posted, "We can argue about policies all day long, but this is the kind of gesture we need more of in the world." Kudos to Barron for showing us what real respect looks like. The response wasn't just limited to regular citizens. Even political figures, including those who had previously criticized Barron's family, took to social media to praise him. Veterans organizations, who had been critical of the treatment they had received from other public figures, expressed their appreciation for Barron's simple yet profound action. Respect for service members should always come first, regardless of political views. "Thank you, Barron Trump, for showing us what true gratitude looks like," tweeted a prominent veterans advocacy group. What stood out most about the media coverage and public response was the unanimous recognition that Barron had done something that most people, regardless of background, could admire. It wasn't about his wealth or his last name. It was about his ability to make a decision rooted in decency and respect for others. Even Barron himself, who was known to keep a low profile, seemed surprised by the attention his gesture had garnered. In interviews, people close to Barron described him as a reserved and humble individual who didn't enjoy the spotlight. But for this one moment, he had stepped into it. Not with the arrogance of someone seeking attention, but with the quiet dignity of someone who simply wanted to do the right thing. For Barron, this wasn't an attempt to change public opinion or make headlines. It was just a gesture of kindness, a moment of recognition for someone who had served their country. But for the rest of the world, it became a powerful reminder that sometimes it's the simplest acts of compassion that can have the biggest impact. As the media continued to report on the story, many began to reflect on what this gesture truly represented. In a world increasingly divided by politics, Barron Trump had shown that there was still space for kindness and empathy, no matter who you were or where you came from. The public, in turn, began to see Barron not just as a member of the Trump family, but as an individual capable of making a positive difference in the world. In the days following Barron Trump's simple yet impactful act of kindness, something remarkable began to unfold. The story, which initially seemed like a small, personal moment of compassion, began to alter the public perception of Barron's family. For years, the Trump name had been associated with controversy, polarization, and political drama. But Barron's gesture, giving up his first-class seat for a veteran, served as a much-needed reminder that human decency could still transcend the noise of politics. The media, initially focused on the political figureheads in the Trump family, started to shift their attention toward Barron. Stories about his act of kindness dominated headlines, and people began to see him as more than just the youngest Trump child. He was being recognized for his compassion and empathy, traits that were not often associated with members of high-profile families. Barron's actions seemed to provide a breath of fresh air in an era where political figures were often defined by their self-interest or divisiveness. Even those who'd been critical of the Trump family found it hard to ignore the significance of Barron's gesture. It's not often that we see someone in Barron's position make a genuine, unselfish decision like this, wrote one prominent journalist. In a world where so much attention is placed on wealth and power, Barron's actions remind us that respect for others should always come first. But the impact didn't just stop with the public. For many, Barron's act represented something far greater than a momentary act of kindness. It became a symbol of change, a symbol of the possibility that a simple act of respect and humility could lead to a shift in narrative for the entire Trump family. Barron's decision to give up his first-class seat was now being viewed as a positive counterpoint to the more controversial aspects of his family's image. In a way, it showed the world that, despite the intense political landscape surrounding the Trumps, there were still individuals within the family who valued compassion and genuine connection with others. It was a rare moment where we saw a human side to the Trump family, a side that had been obscured for so long by the intense media focus on politics and public perception, said a political analyst in a widely circulated article. Barron Trump's actions showed us that there is more to his story than his father's political legacy. He's shown us that even in the most polarized environment, kindness can break through. The veteran who received Barron's seat also became a key figure in the conversation. His humble gratitude in accepting the seat highlighted the significance of the moment. This wasn't just about getting a more comfortable seat, the veteran shared in an interview. It was about feeling seen, feeling respected. Barron didn't have to do this, but he did, and it reminded me of what truly matters in life, treating people with dignity, no matter who they are. In many ways, Barron's gesture helped to soften the public's harsh perceptions of the Trump family. Despite their political differences, people from all walks of life began to view Barron not as the son of a controversial figure, but as a young man capable of making a positive difference in the world. His action was a quiet but powerful reminder that human connection, empathy, and selflessness were values that transcended politics. For the Trump family, Barron's gesture also marked a significant shift. While his parents remained active in the political spotlight, Barron had quietly become a figure who embodied something deeper: the ability to create change through small, meaningful actions. People saw Barron as someone who had the potential to redefine the Trump family legacy, not through grandiose gestures or political moves, but through simple acts of kindness. The narrative around Barron Trump, which had once been clouded by the political drama surrounding his family, was now slowly being rewritten. The story of the young man who gave up his seat for a veteran was becoming a story about compassion, respect, and the power of everyday choices. And with that, Barron had proven that sometimes the smallest gestures have the greatest impact, and in the process had managed to change the way the world saw him and his family. Months after Barron Trump's heartfelt decision to give up his first-class seat for a veteran, the story continued to resonate deeply with people across the country. While most acts of kindness fade with time, Barron's simple gesture had left a lasting mark, not just on the passengers who witnessed it, but on the broader public, creating a legacy that transcended his family's often controversial image. For Barron, the impact was subtle but profound. Though he remained a private figure, the wave of respect that followed him was undeniable. He hadn't sought attention, hadn't made grand statements or gestures, yet his one decision had shown the world a side of him that few had ever seen: a genuine and thoughtful young man, capable of making a difference in the most unexpected ways. Barron's gesture served as a reminder that people's actions often spoke louder than their words, and his act of kindness was a powerful demonstration of character. The ripple effect of his choice spread far beyond the plane. Over time, Barron's act became a touchstone for discussions about empathy, respect, and the simple ways we can all contribute to a more compassionate world. People shared his story in social media posts, blogs, and even in classrooms where teachers used it to encourage students to think about the importance of putting others before oneself. Veterans groups, in particular, adopted Barron's gesture as an example of how society should treat those who served. The act wasn't about charity or pity. It was about honoring and respecting those who had sacrificed for the country. It sparked conversations about how veterans, often forgotten or underappreciated, should be treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. Barron had done something small, but in the eyes of so many, it was one of the most meaningful and impactful gestures seen in recent years. Barron's legacy also began to take root among his peers. Young people who had watched the news or read about his actions took inspiration from the simple kindness he had shown. Social media was flooded with posts from teenagers and young adults, echoing the sentiment that Barron's action had reminded them of the importance of selflessness and empathy. Barron, who had always been in the shadows of his family's high-profile public life, was now seen as a role model for the next generation. Across the country, small community groups began organizing events where people could give back in ways that mirrored Barron's gesture. Whether it was offering a seat to an elderly passenger on public transport or helping a neighbor in need, Barron's story became a call to action for many. In a world where people were often quick to focus on their own needs and desires, Barron's decision had set a standard for how people could lift others up with simple, meaningful actions. The mainstream media, too, began to revisit the narrative surrounding Barron. While the Trump family's public image remained complex, Barron had carved out his own space, one that wasn't defined by his last name or his father's political controversies. Instead, Barron's legacy was now tied to his ability to show kindness in a world that often felt divided. The focus shifted from his father's political life to Barron's own quiet example of how to act with dignity and respect. For the Trump family, Barron's gesture marked a significant moment of pride. While his parents remained in the public eye, it was Barron who had shown that even in the midst of intense public scrutiny, humanity and compassion still mattered. It was a reminder that no matter how much the world might focus on politics, there was still room for acts of kindness that could unite rather than divide. As Barron continued to grow, his story remained a beacon of hope for those who believed that true leadership didn't always come from the loudest voices or the most powerful positions. It came from people who chose to lead with their hearts. Barron Trump had shown that the simplest acts of decency could carry the most weight, and his example would continue to inspire generations to come. And so, Barron's legacy lived on, not through headlines or grand speeches, but through the small, quiet moments of kindness that would forever be remembered by those who had witnessed it. His decision to give up his seat for a veteran had changed more than just one flight. It had changed the way people thought about leadership, compassion, and the power of everyday kindness. What do you think of Barron Trump's act of kindness? Do you believe small gestures like this can have a big impact on the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more uplifting stories of compassion, leadership, and positive change. Let's spread kindness together.